All right. 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for another collab special. It's a Gagga special this time. You know who it is. It's Dropped Kickoff with Talking Teams. Of course, I have the trusty Nathan Williamson by my side from DKO, as well as the man himself, Happy, Talking Teams. Nathan, first of all, before we introduce our esteemed colleague, how are we feeling? What's your first thoughts about this squad? We have a Wallaby squad. We have a squad, finally.
We're finally there. The wait was over. You know, all it took was the Brumbies losing a semi-final to get it done. Those selfish Brumbies for daring to kick on. No, I think last year's squad was full of surprises and full of shock value. This one's a lot more settled, a lot more based and measured. So I like what Schmidt's put together in this 36.
Yeah, I love the based approach. I love your it's based, and not saying it in the in the modern internet sense where it's based in truth and reality. Happy, are you in a similar headspace, or do you have some scratches and headspace thoughts about this squad?
Mate, it's I'm loving it. I'm absolutely fizzing for the whole 8-9 weeks that lie ahead of us, but. It's just refreshing to look at a squad and go, you know what? I think the adults might have picked this team.
Isn't that nice?
I know. It feels like it. You know, like I'm an old man, and it feels like a long time since that's happened. So I look at it and I go, you know what? And you guys are young, so you would not be aware of this, where adults actually pick the team, and you look at it and go, that makes sense. I can disagree with a couple of bits and pieces, but it actually makes sense.
I've spent too much time having to deal with Checker, and then we had a little bit of adult with Rennie, and then Eddie Jones came in. It's been a long time since an adult's actually picked the Wallabies.
Mate,
it's crazy.
You'll be in therapy for a long time with Eddie when Eddie's trying to work. Like,
yeah, I hear the subtle mate when I try and sleep at night. Still, it's not good. This counts as my therapy right now.
Yeah, I will say, I must admit, I actually could really agree with both of you, bar a couple, one or two players who I might have a qualm with. Like, it is actually a squad that doesn't necessarily have a lot of surprises, but in a good way, if that kind of makes sense. It's like, it's the players who are the 36 who, you know, I and probably a lot of people think, oh yeah, those are the players that we thought were going to be in this squad, or players that, generally speaking, you know, that is going to be the strongest representation that the Wallabies have at this current point in time, which is weird because I feel like this feels like in stark contrast to our chat with JB on the Egg Chasers, where he was filled with questions about the Lions squad and this Lions setup, and it feels kind of strangely the opposite. Maybe that's just our own bias coming in.
Well, it is obviously our bias coming in because. You know, but I think if you look at the Australian squad and the Lions squad, the Lions almost seem to be searching for it at the moment. Like, there's a lot of guys who have been picked on past performance, not current, and it just feels like a lot of this team is kind of picks itself and kind of has set its store out through their work this season. So just really excited for it.
Yeah,
let's talk. On top of that, I was just going to say, because that's a very valid point when you look at the people that don't make this squad. Guys like your James O'Connors, your Sami Karevis, Corin Betes, who had been in past squads, and a lot of people were calling for their heads. But you're right, this feels like a squad picked on relatively recent form over the past 12 months, rather than their standing in past teams or past performances in a gold jersey.
Correct.
Let's dive straight into this squad, and I think the best place to start is the place that is, you know, the best place for any rugby team and any rugby discussion to start, and that is the forward pack. 20 forwards selected in this squad. Couple of bolters, couple of surprises, and this is probably the area where I had kind of the most questions and surprises. I must admit, the big one for me, the big question mark, let's just to get the questionable or stuff that you know that is kind of the one that I'm a few question marks is the one that Nathan is already responding to in his comment there, which is Dave Parecki is the big question mark for me. Happy, or actually before Nathan, because I know Nathan's going to defend him no matter what. I need a Happy. Are you on the Dave Parecki? Are you on the Dave Parecki pork barrel train?
Well, I think pork barrel is the correct word with Dave Parecki. Look, I always apply the rule of if you say somebody isn't good, you're gonna have to pick someone to go in, or if you say someone should go in, you got to pick the person who should go out. And I think Dave Parecki stands out as the guy who's the luckiest in the forward pack. You know, Richie Asiata's had a good season. Billy Pollard's had a good season. Even Nick Dolly's has had a really good season. And I would personally rate them all above that. Nick Dolly's obviously, he's played at the highest level. He's played for England, which is a shame for him, but, fair play. Throws really good. Yeah, exactly. Well, the British and Irish Lions obviously don't with the number of Australians they pick, but throws a really good line out, really good at set piece, good around the park. So I just wonder what Dave Parecki has shown in the last 2 years of not playing that allows him to be picked. Realistically, he's played, played 6 Super Rugby games in the last 2 years?
Yeah, he got 8 in this year. Eight in this year.
8. So he's played 8 in 2 years. And not really stood out, to be honest. I'd argue Maya Valanu has probably played better for the New South, for the Tars than Parecki has. So he'd be my big pick of in the forward pack of the standout shouldn't be there.
Nathan, I'm going to allow you now the chance to defend
the rebuttal.
Your boy Parecki.
The rebuttal.
We need a rebuttal on this one because I'm sorry, I'm very much in the happy camp here. Not that I think Parecki's a bad player, and I mean he's a Wallaby captain, of course. He's a great player. Of just, he just hasn't had as much chance to strut his stuff as BPA or Dolly or even Lockie Lonergan. So that's kind of where my questions are, as well as Richie over at the Reds.
Which is, again, fair enough. Like, I think that hooker spot is so competitive. But what I like about Dave Parecki, and always have ever since he first got into that Wallabies contention, is just how solid he is. And you're right, he's not as flashy as a Richie Asiata, who's, was scoring tries for fun. A Vailanu, who's essentially outside of Charlie Gamble, was the only breakdown throughout the Waratahs. Pangra Moses is more powerful, but Dave Parecki is just so good for me set piece wise. He's so consistent that's as a line out throw, which I think is one of the biggest weaknesses we've had in Australian rugby in the past. I think scrummaging is underrated. That combination with Bell and Tupou, I think, would have been a big factor in deciding this. Now, I think from memory, Joe did get asked about Pangra Moses and said, "Look, yeah, the injuries kind of went against him and." Yeah, you make that argument from Dave Parecki, but he did suit up for the last 4 rounds of the season. So he is at least some runs on the ball to suggest that he is fit rather than Pangra Moses, who might still be carrying a bit of I believe it's a calf niggle, which kept him out for a lot of the season, a lot of the back end of the season, sorry. So I think if Pangra Moses is fit, I think he would have beat him out, but just that injury concern, it feels like Joe Schmidt was not really keen to take many risks on players who might have an injury concern outside of Matt Fessler, who he's already indicated will probably end up playing for Queensland in this Lions tour and then rejoin the squad. So I think that's just been the big thing has won Parecki this spot. Is just ironically for him being fit at the right moment in the year.
I think it makes sense, but I do kind of get it, but it does feel like there's some question marks about it because in my head I would be going. I feel like if when it comes to the scrummaging, when it comes particularly the line out, I feel like Dolly's been the more reliable head. I think we did a piece on a non-green and gold related site that shall remain nameless, but we kind of talked about people who we bolted into the side, and Dolly is averaging just under 90% success rate when it comes to line-out throws, which kind of addresses that key concern that we sort of have around, Australia picking off the line-out. And, I mean, we'll get into a little bit later, but, Schmidt's picked a lot of players from that Western Force line-out that is a reason why that Force line-out has been so strong. So, question marks about it. But, look, Parecki was named a Wallaby captain for a reason. He was named. He's received international honours for a reason. So, it's even there. You can see the reasoning behind it. You don't seem so sure, Happy,
mate. I've got nothing against Dave Parecki. Like, to be honest, I think he's a really good player. But my rebuttal to that would be he was picked as Australian captain by Eddie Jones. So
True.
So if you're going to articulate that perspective, you need to put a caveat around it. So it's kind of like, yes, he was Australian captain, and he did it like how he kept a straight face through all of Eddie Jones's rantings. I don't know, but he did, and for that I give him all the credit in the world. So I see what you're saying, but I just I think to your point. I look at it and I go, I just wonder whether Nick Dolly suffered because Western Force played basically the whole year with very, very thin on the ground for props. So when their front row was getting pumped, was part of that blame put on him. I just look at it and I think he provides a lot more around the park, provides better line, great line out. He's got all buttoned down. Same with Richie Asiata, scoring tries for fun, more explosive, blah blah blah. I just don't see that as being the best pick.
Probably fair, yeah. Like again, the forced front row. You're right. Outside of Tom Robinson, always had a weak link there that was exposed. And I wonder if Nick Dolly was around last year, if he was in a few more Wallaby squads, that he would have figured a bit more. But the only other thing I can think of when it comes to Nick Dolly is just that. The fact that it's a Lions series and Joe is keen to sort of have those combinations and have combinations that work together at test level before, like, again, Parecki with Skelton and Frost at the 23 World Cup. So, but you're right. Nick Dolly's been very solid and is probably one of those people that should, at a minimum, starts for the Force on next Saturday, but also should be involved in that AUNZ game just to see how he goes at that next level.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like we've been really zeroing in on Parecki here, and the hooker positions in general, because, and I realize I should kind of say this, but I feel like every other player in the other 19 forwards, I reckon, have really earned a lot of their spots in that regard. You guys may disagree. I want to really zero in on a couple of players who have been called back in after a bit of a stint outside, not outside of the Wallaby lineup. And I mean, there's two staying in the West with Dolly. I mean, Tom Robertson is back in the side, which I think is a good inclusion. He really grew into the season, in my opinion. He didn't start very well in that match against Moana Pacifica, but he really grew into the season and is a very valuable backup prop for the side as well. Darcy Swain, well earned, in my opinion. Well earned. I think his discipline's improved at the Force. I think he's become one of the most effective line-out stealers in that side, which I think is particularly promising and exciting. He's a really good, versatile player. He's a lot more physical. I know he's kind of featured a couple of times in our teams of the week, which has been really, really positive. And I'm not going to lie. I mean, I always had a bit of an asterisk around putting in debutants into Lions squads and Lions tests, but I'm going to say I can't really argue with Nick Champion de Crepney being included as well. I think he's been phenomenal. This season. Thoughts, Happy?
That Nick Champion de Crepney, he's, in my view, one of the best sixers running around in the comp. Like, he's been exactly what you want, and you can argue that he's uncapped, but he played in top 14 for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, he's definitely got the experience.
Played. Was it Toulouse he played for over there?
Castres.
Castres. Yeah, so it's, again, not a bum team. Was in their team regularly and played some of their big games, and he's come back and looked like that kind of hard-edged professional player that you would expect to see from somebody who's playing in the close quarters of a French winter. I love his game. I think he's fantastic. And while the back row, personally, I think the back row is Valentini, McWright, and Wilson until something happens. If one of those if Valentini or Wilson goes down, Nick the next one off the rank. Without doubt. I wouldn't. I'd rate him above Gleeson, and in fact, I think Gleeson's probably the one personally that I would drop out of that squad in favour of somebody else. I know that'll be very unpopular south of the border, but I just I mean, last year I was calling him Flippers Gleeson because he couldn't catch the goal, but this year he's been much better. Like to be honest, I always try to reset at the start of the season. This year his hands have been really good, and he has been good. But I just personally I think there's better people in that space. But yeah, that's that's where I'm at.
It's good that you mentioned that. It was kind of off the back of the Gleeson chat. There was a bit of a question asked today by a certain dashing young man who works for rugby.com.au of Joe Schmidt, who particularly when asked. I mean, there were questions that came up about some players who actually missed out. The two that really came to mind was, I mean, obviously BPA was mentioned, but also Seru Uru at the Reds and Lukan Salakai-Aloto. And there was a really good point raised by Schmidt that just because they've missed out on this initial 36 squad doesn't mean that then they won't strap up they won't potentially play, because, things can happen, players can change. They'll also still be keeping, an eye on their form against the Lions specifically as well. When they play for the Reds or for the Force or whatever, for their respective provincial sides, which could still play a factor. If they actually end up playing for the Wallabies. And of course, there's also the other games with the AUZ NZ Invitational and the First Nations Pacifica. Taniela Tupou. I think that's the other big question here. Nath, I know this kind of came up a lot today about Taniela and his inclusion, because I mean, Taniela himself has been very honest about saying that he doesn't think he's playing his best rugby, and yet he's also in this squad. He's still picked in this squad all the same. What's kind of the approach and the thought mentality here with Taniela? Because I know that he's an increasingly divisive figure in many rugby circles at the moment.
He is, to be fair. But in terms of divisive, the fans, a lot of people don't want him. But when you ask any player what they think of Taniela, the exact same thing comes out of their mouth. We need a strong Taniela to compete with the British and Irish Lions. And I think, yes, the form this year has been pretty much below standard. I'll stop short saying well below standard, because there were glimpses towards the end of the old Taniela. But I think if there's any environment that's going to get the best out of him, it has to be this one. Like, there's so much damage he can cause when you consider we could be facing a late game situation where you have Taniela Tupou and Will Skelton on the same side packing down, trying to win a big scrum for us. I think that's basically what they're going off. They're hoping that this environment gets the best out of him and gets him going again. Because, look, he's coming off two major injuries over the past couple of years. This is not going to be the same Taniela that bulldozed people in 2020, 2021. Those sort of years are done, I think. What he can do and what he needs to do against the Lions is scrummage his heart out and take it to them. And I think that's why he won his spot in this team is, yes, the explosiveness is not there, but I saw it enough in those last couple of rounds that the scrummaging is still there. And that's going to be the key for him.
Nathan, I've got a question for you I've got a question for both of you, because you're obviously closer to Rugby HQ than I am. Do you think Taniela Tupou's all up inside his head at the moment? Do you think he's just overthinking the whole thing? Whereas
1,000%.
I think he is. Yes,
he should be just see ball, hit ball, see tackle, hit tackle, kind of. Whether Joe Schmidt's sort of thinking I can just strip it all back and just clear his head out. Whether at the TARS he's been expected to do all this other shit, which he's good at, but it's kind of natural. He's not a thinking man's player, if you know what I mean.
I think that is completely and 110% the correct answer. For it nails Taniela Tupou in many ways, shapes, and forms. I think so. Talking to a lot of players, as well. The one I had to chat to that I did an article on today was Alan Alatoa, who talked about this. Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
Nothing crazy, nothing special.
It's nothing special. But this question actually came up a lot for Alan because the conversation around Nell. I mean, Alan himself had to come back from an Achilles injury that ruled him out of the 2023 World Cup, and he kind of had a kind of a great response about this one and related it to Nella, and basically saying, look, yeah, there's the physical aspect of it, but then there's also the mental part. Like, you're doing the same activities that got you injured in the first place. You've got to overcome that mental hurdle because you're afraid that you're going to do it again. And that takes a lot of time, and it also takes, a lot of that mental aspect is as difficult as the physical one because you're not going to go as hard as you would initially to begin with because you don't want to get injured again. He kind of also talked about how, like, he's worked with Nella, with Taniela for a while now, and he's a good person and he's a good character, and he's someone that when he's happy, he is on form. He is like one of those players that is like, you wouldn't even second guess him as a player to include. And that when he brings in the actual value, when the value that he can bring in when he's at his happiest and most cheerful and enjoying his rugby, far outweighs is more value than gold. And he says it also comes down to them, like the surrounding squad, to also make sure that environment keeps him happy. Because if he's in a happy, good headspace, he can also, that'll help him to push past that mental aspect of it. So yeah, I think it's 110% him struggling mentally to kind of overcome the fact that he had two really bad injuries back to back that sidelined him for a long time. That's definitely what it is, I think.
There's a wonderful article from Jonathan Drennan that was in the Sydney Morning Herald about a month or 6 weeks ago, where Taniela goes through his process and essentially the idea of questioning, can he even catch a ball anymore? Can he actually do anything? And it was such a fascinating insight into his psyche, and exactly what you identified, Happy, that, yeah, he is completely in his own head right now. And there's been still a couple of brain explosions on the way, which just sort of have shown that Taniela's biggest weakness is Taniela himself, and him just sort of losing the plot and overthinking things. So, look, you have a group where you have someone like Angus Bell, who's very close with him. Alan Altoa is close with him. There's a couple of ex-Rebels boys in there. Like, I'm hoping this is the environment and this is the stage where he just comes back and can block out all the noise, keep the focus very simple, and just get back to doing what he does best.
Yeah, 100%. Because personally, I think the Lions front row is there to be had.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a potential there.
Yeah, I don't look at their front row like the mob who came out last time and be frankly thinking, fuck, I hope we get out of this. Like, I actually think they can be had.
I think there was technically they're quite strong. Like they've got good technique and approach like that. But in terms of actual bulk and ability, I reckon Australia has the potential to really overtake them a bit. And it's a good mention to have there because the only international player as well is Will Skelton as well, which I must admit I'm pretty happy with. I'm actually thinking that's not a bad inclusion, seeing as he's been part of that setup for a while as well. He's kind of, yes, he's the only person outside of, there's no Sami Karevi, there's no Marika Korobetti, no other international stars in the mix there. But I think he's ideal to add that extra bulk. I think clearly Schmidt's identified that there's going to be a lot of scrummaging and a lot of headspace there, and that's something that Will is very, very good at.
Yeah. I think it's partially a bit of a mind game into the Lions because he's highly respected as being one of the best second rows in the world in the Northern Hemisphere. We tend to have a lower opinion of him in Australia than the Europeans have of him. They think he's amazing because, frankly, when he left Australia, he was just a big fat guy, and he's turned himself into a proper athlete over there, and he destroys mauls for fun over there. And I can remember a couple of years ago, I saw him playing against Scotland. He got over the ball, and like 3 players hit him, and he didn't move an inch. So he's sort of developed his game, and he's got a real imposition about him, and gets that amazing, can get that front foot ball. So last 20 minutes, I think he's a special in each of the games.
There's a fascinating point there, because when you look at just how the UK and the rest of sort of Ireland, the British and Isles, have reported on this Wallaby squad, there are two guys that get names, and that is Will Skelton and Joseph Akusu-Suaalii. Now, you look at me, like, if I'm looking at a Wallaby squad and I'm picking who needs the fire for us to have a chance, Suaalii might be close to the top 5, but there's more important players. I think that's actually an underrated strength that the Wallabies have. Is I think guys like Rob Valentini, Angus Bell, not just moving into the backs, Lenny Cattell, Tom Wright, and the like, can come into this series really underrated. And I predict there's going to be at some point of this series where those guys are going to fire. And this might bite me in the ass, but I don't care. There's going to be a lot of UK and Irish watchers of the game that look and go, wait, where did these guys come from? How are these guys doing this? And all of a sudden, we're going to be sitting back being like, yeah, this is what we've known for 4 or 5 years. You've been focusing on the big names you've seen, but we've had these guns for years. They're now starting to come together.
Yeah, I genuinely believe that Bell's the most important player of the series for Australia. I genuinely think he's the most important player. No disrespect to everyone else, but when it comes to that scrum, when it comes to set piece and go forward, and his ability to tear up England like he did at Twickenham on the big stage, he's the player that I'm really excited to watch. It's so good that they're only talking about Will Skelton and Suaalii, and also not mentioning Bobby V either. I'll take that. I'll take that to the bank.
I reckon the coaching staff the Lions coaching staff will be paying a lot of attention to Bell, which will give opportunity elsewhere. Like that, they're not idiots. Those guys, they'll be going, he's important. Like that's the guy. Bell will be one of the guys who they'll be really paying attention to, which to a certain extent will give someone like a Taniela Tupou. He won't be the focus, which he has been in the past. So he may actually get a bit of an opportunity to express himself. So forward battle is going to be interesting. Balance is interesting because if Skelton coming off the bench and you replace one of the second rowers, you're basically getting down to very thin. If we all agree that Valentini, Wilson are the back three, Wilson. Skelton doesn't jump really, so it modifies how you got to put your backline, your replacements together. So you've got to bring on a jumper with Skelton, or you've got to have a jumper in your back three with Skelton if he starts. So that changes the way the team's put together, which is probably why Tom Hooper's been picked.
Yeah, I think that's
he can play 6 and being a jumper.
Yeah, I saw that and thought that's exactly why Tom Hooper is in there. I think Carlo Tizzano, he can jump, can't he? I'm pretty sure he's
I don't think so, no.
No,
mate,
nothing crazy.
Jump, but Tizzano's like 5'9" or 5'10". Like,
yeah, I know. The moment I said it, I went, "No, hang on a minute, Nick. Come on, mate."
If you're going to play Skelton, you have like a Jeremy Williams or Nick Frost that you can maybe move back to 6. That's your other option.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
That's if you put Jeremy Williams at 6, that does give you the jumbo package in the pack, though, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
It's beef. It's some premium quality beef in
there.
Yeah. Let's talk back line. I reckon 16 backs in the squad, and a couple of really interesting names in there. I found it notable that they're choosing to stick with the original halves, the fly half positions with Tom Liner, Ben Donaldson, and Noah Lolosio in the squad. No James O'Connor, no inclusion there, though Schmidt admitted that he has been talking to James O'Connor, and which probably means that he'll likely feature in some way, shape, or form, whether it be for the AUNZ side or an equivalent. It's an interesting squad. Not a lot of, I must say, it quite a settled backline, Nathan. I must admit, there's not really a lot that I can complain about, to be 100% honest with you.
No, and the only one in that's been different in past squads is Corey Toole, who, yes, has his defensive issues. You need an attacking weapon like that. Just as sort of Happy said before, it just gives them another thing to think about as well. Just gives them another thing to worry about, another thing to plan for. Personally, I'm happy James O'Connor's not in the squad. Like, he's somebody that is, again, I think I've said this in a couple of pods before, is the backup 10 for the Crusaders. I seriously wonder what message we send if James O'Connor, who can't start the Crusaders, is preferred over 3 young guys that have stayed here and toiled and playing, at some stages averaging 70, 75 minutes for top Australian clubs. Yes, he's been a lot better this year than he hasn't been in past years, but I think most halves would be if you had Will Jordan, Sevu Reece, David Havili, Braden Ennor, and I think the first 4 names on a team. The first 4 names on the team sheet are All Blacks. Like, he started one game and they lost. In fact, the way Rayhana and Kamara, way Kamara started and Rayhana has finished, you can make a serious case that if the Crusaders, if Kamara was fit right now, O'Connor might not be in that 23. I just think it's the right call to back the guys that have been there before in that Wallaby setup, back Australian young halves, and just let them. Because, I mean, how many times that we've just... And James O'Connor's one of those guys. How many times we've thrown a half out there? Giving him 18 months in a system and then gone, all right, you're done. Next. Next guy comes in. 18 months. Next.
Yeah.
Like
the Mac Mason.
Yeah.
The Mac Mason of it all.
Will Harrison. So many options.
Yeah.
You raise a great point, and this is another reason why I'm really glad Alessio is in the side. I know that so many people are quick to come out and throw pot shots at Lolosio, but there was a great point that I noticed last year, how particularly in that win over Argentina, how increasingly his approach as a fly half changed, particularly when he had a more effective ball carrier like Hamish Stewart alongside him as that kind of second distributor. And funnily enough, I've noticed, in that a really good video that Squidge did on the analysis of the Australian side, he picked up on how effectively there's actually the actual ball distributor kind of role has started to really be shared around a lot more by the wider back line, which actually enables someone like Lolosio to play their own natural game. I started to notice him taking up hit-ups. I started to notice him actually kind of being a bit more organized and structured in his approach, doing more tackles, getting a bit more involved, which probably plays into his style a little bit more. So I'm very glad to see him in there. I'm very glad to see Ben Donaldson in there as well, because I think Dono actually probably bests Lolosio in attack capability as a fly half, but is less of an all-rounded player, which I think makes him very effective as the deputy player as well. I reckon Toole gets hot take. I reckon Toole gets a cap this year. I reckon Toole gets a cap this year. I'm going to call it here. He's waited long enough. I think he gets a cap this year, because that try against the Chiefs, I thought to myself, oh yeah, like he's a fast player, but I didn't realize how much power he has until he scored that try against the Chiefs in the semi-final, which absolutely blew me away in terms of skill set and everything like that. So there's my hot take. There's my hot take of this podcast, lads. It's official. The Tool will be let out of the box.
Yeah.
I'm all for him getting a shot at some point. My issue with Corey Toole has always been the fact that he is not a good defender. And he's rocked on. This is a man who, again, throughout this entire year, I think he's played basically every game, has had 145 attempts at tackles and missed 42. He played against Australia. Australia. So I was going to say Australia A. He turned up against England, and I think he had 13 attempts and missed 6 of them.
But 11 tries.
So what you're saying is he's got the same tackle success rate as Owen Farrell.
Yes, yellow cards.
Yeah, I'll say this about Corey Toole. It's this thing that really shits me about some of the conversation. It's like, let's focus on what he can't do well. What does he do well? He has the sort of speed and the sort of evasive ability and the sort of ability with ball in hand as a winger that makes other professional athletes shit themselves. And that is very, very rare because you see that occasionally, that BLBRE from France, Louis Rees-Zammit in his pomp, Cheflin Colby in his pomp, Brian Habana in his pomp, where they get a little bit of space and they're gone. And when you see other professional athletes, because all these professional athletes, they're so good, they're all so close together that they'll trust the process, they'll trust the system in defence and everything like that. And every now and then you get a player like a Naeem Scudder or something like that who's so good for not a very long period of time that he makes them, other professional athletes, shit themselves in defence. And Corey Toole does that. Like he will do something. If he gets a go, he'll do something in a test that will make another professional athlete shit themselves. And suddenly it'll all be about him. I think if I were looking at the back line, I think Max Jorgensen's very lucky. You talk about, injury and not playing and all that sort of stuff. And apparently it's the second coming and all that sort of stuff. But, I look at it and I go, Lockie Anderson, there's a whole stack of other guys who I think have had really good seasons who I'd pick in front of him. I don't know. Apparently, I haven't quite seen it yet, but apparently he's got stuff that makes other professional athletes shit themselves. But that's what I'm looking at the backs. That's kind of what I think. I think elephant in the room. I think Jake Gordon's very lucky. I think he's been picked on past performances, not current performances. Missed most of the season, and the Tars didn't look that great when he was back, to be honest. But I'm a Queenslander. I hate them, so I'll leave it with you guys.
I got to defend South of Gordon here. I mean, Jake Gordon, you're completely right. You're completely right on Jake Gordon. He's coming off the back of his best year in Test footy in 24, and that is definitely won him selection. And he's standing as a leader in this Wallaby squad. Not my words, they're Joe's words himself. Max Jorgensen, I think these first 3 or 4 weeks, I thought was some of the best outside back play that we had in Super Rugby. Like, what I like about, in terms of shitting himself, ask the 60 million Englishmen who shit themselves when he scored that winning try at Twickenham.
Yeah, true that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. But in saying that as well, like, you're right. Yeah, he hasn't played that much football in the last 2 to 3 months. And
you said the last first 3 or 4 weeks, and that was 12 weeks ago. So
completely right. But the point I want to make from that is another guy that I think was really unlucky is Tristan Riley. I thought he was one of the Waratahs' best.
He was excellent. Yeah,
like he is. You want to talk about. Probably doesn't make other people shit themselves, but his work rate and his effort in defense, the way every single game, he gives you 100% and just lays out people, can create stuff from nothing as well. I think he's if he had another 12 months of this, he's in a Wallabies jersey in 2026. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think he fills the same role that your Filippo Dangunu type of player is. Both of them have a red card in them, but but strong over the ball, good tacklers. Strong over the ball, good tacklers, high physical in contact. Exactly what you want from an outside back, and can finish with speed.
Yeah, I like Daugunu in this squad. I'll be 100% honest with you. I reckon he's had. He's had a pretty decent season at the Reds this year, particularly considering I do think when Hunter Paisami was on form, he was back to his kind of barnstorming best, which we kind of really wanted to work as an effective foil alongside Lenny Ikitau, but he didn't have the most consistent season. I thought Daugunu offers the really good utility. He kind of he can play on the wing. He also can play in the centres. He's really shown himself as a very capable individual in that regard. I do have another question about this one, and it's kind of about the other big star in question here, because I'm looking at this squad. There's a lot of great back 3 options. Of course, we've mentioned Toole, but Harry Potter, who got capped last year, Dylan Peach, who has looked really solid when he hasn't been injured. You've got the option of Jorgensen. You've got the option of Filippo Daugunu, who can slot into that role. And of course, there's I think I mentioned Tom Wright as well. Where do we put Joseph Akuso Suolihi? Does he move back to the centres? I know we've talked about this in our episode, in our pod, Nathan. And I'm firmly Suolihi back in the centres because that England match and the Ireland match as well, for that matter, really showed he can work quite nicely with Ikitau and working as an extra distributor to open space up. But it feels more the case like he will be back in the centres based on the options available in this backline, would you say?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I mean, Paisano is your only other 12 option in this squad. I think, the temptation would have been to bring Sama Karevi back, who's been lighting up Rugby League 1 in Japan. I think he's scored 12 tries in his last 8 games for his side. But I think his test time is done. So, yeah, I think given the sort of makeup of the squad, centers is probably your only option. There's a part of me that would have loved to see what he would have been like on a wing. But, yeah, I think Schmidt's set in him being a center.
Yeah, and there's also Kellaway as well, who I think you'd probably be one of your starting wingers, to be 100% honest. He's just a really solid as a rock inclusion there, which I think is a decent option there. Do you reckon Whitey's got away with it as well to get in there? But I know that the real reason is he's a real experienced head. There isn't a lot of caps in this squad, and 71 caps of experience is very, very handy. But he didn't exactly set the world on fire for the Western Force this season. Do you reckon? What are our thoughts on the halfback situation? And is it a case of? I mean, I know he's been the best finisher for the Wallabies. He's wearing that 21 jersey. He's been electric and brilliant. But I kind of do want to see Tate start. I do. I kind of think Tate's done enough to start, even though I think he's proven extremely effective as a finisher. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think Nick White's pass is the best of all three of the halfbacks chosen. Guy out of the Brumbies, whose name escapes me at the moment. I think
Ryan Lonergan.
Probably the most. Ryan Lonergan, very, very, very unlucky.
What does the dude have to do? I'm sorry, I'm now going to have a little rant here. What does he got to do to get a
Go on, Brumby supporter, have a crack.
What has he got to do, particularly with Lalesio? I think Ryan is one of the most underappreciated gems in Australian rugby, just for his hidden ability and his ability to distribute that side. I'm sorry, go back. You continue on.
But clearly he's got to move to Sydney. But
absolutely,
yes.
Too real.
Anyway, yeah, well, yeah. No, look, I just think again that it comes down. It's that Parecki thing. Jake Gordon obviously holds standing within the hierarchy, and Tate McDermott and Nick White couldn't be dropped because Tate's played unbelievably good footy all year. It's inarguable. Again, people say, his pass isn't as good as some others. Yeah, but his running's elite, his gameplay's elite, his sniping's elite, everything else, and his pass is pretty bloody good. Nick White, when he comes on, his width of pass is quite something to see. There's a couple of passes he made for the Force where he's passed and a player's thought, I've got an intercept here, and then all of a sudden the ball's outside him and winger's gone. I think Harry Potter can thank Nick White for probably 3 or 4 tries this year, just from the pass creating the space, and then Harry Potter being good enough to do the rest. So, I think for me, I think I'm with you. I'd start with Tate and have Nick White coming off the bench, because Nick White is that older, smarter head who can, if we're in front by 10, slow the game down, box kick, just grind it. If he needs to inject pace, he's still got 20 minutes of throwing pace into the game in his legs. He probably doesn't have the 80 anymore, but he's still got 20 to 30. I just see Jake Gordon as being a bit boring, to be honest. He's not really fast. His pass is okay, but it's not as good as Nick White's. His box kick's good, but what else does he bring? In reality, the Ryan Lonergan argument comes to mind. I think Ryan Lonergan has as good or better box kick, is better speed around the ground, and probably has an equivalent pass. So, if it's a meritocracy, I just don't see how Gordon gets the gig.
I think it's because Jake Gordon is the typical Schmidt 9. Like you talk about box kicking,
yeah, he's Conor Murray. Yeah,
he's essentially Conor Murray 2.0. Then if Schmidt wants to play his system, he sees Conor Murray right in Jake Gordon, and that's probably one of the better sort of arguments for Jake Gordon in the squad is just, again, how solid all around the park he is. I love him as a fighter as well, and he's just going to fight for every loose ball. He's going to, again, an underrated leader as well. And you sort of, Nick, you referenced the Squidge video, and he was absolutely right that Tate McDermott's, I think, biggest challenge to being a starter is the fact that he is the best number 21 in world rugby. There is nobody better coming off the bench, changing a game than Tate McDermott. And the problem is when you have such a good finisher like that and you're going to get – it's one of those sort of challenges that every coach face, or mainly at an international level. If you can get 30 minutes off the bench, you can get 8 to 9 out of 10 every single time. Are you going to take that as a coach? You probably are. Could you? But Tate as an 8 to 9 out of 10 starting test number 9, well, it hasn't been as consistent as what he's been off the bench. So I think that works against Tate. It's just it sounds weird and it's almost like a similar strain to the Reece Hodge issues where he was just too versatile for his own good. Tate McDermott is just too good off the bench for his own good. He needs a couple of stinkers off the bench to really sort of reset the tempo and for Joe to be like, all right, let's try you back as a starter. Let's see what happens.
God damn it, Tate! You could have fucked it up last year, but you didn't. You were just too good.
I think you make an excellent point in that, but it also allies to a conversation I had with a mate of mine who's with mad Queensland supporters obviously, and Tate's such a singular player. It's a bit like Quade Cooper. If you've got Quade Cooper at 10, your backup 10 is kind of like redundant because you've got him and you revolve your game plan around it. So Tate, he's such a good dynamic runner around the base and everything. He's kind of like Kalani Thomas is a very good halfback, but he's totally different. He's a traditional Aaron Smith type halfback, great pass on him, but doesn't have that speed that Tate's got. I'll tell you an interesting story offline about Tate. But yeah, it's one of those things where Tate's got those couple of little things that just set him apart in a completely different way.
So I think it's definitely one that we're going to have to look at, and it definitely begs the question around looking forward with this. But gentlemen, we have our squad. We officially have our response to the Lions squad for this series for 2025. We will see a couple of these players also play for their provincial sides as well. At the time of us talking, there will be a couple of players remaining in the West for the Western Force when the Lions arrive in Perth. I think Swain, Crepney, Dylan Peach, Tom Robertson, Nick White are all set to stay, which means that they're likely going to earn starting selection for the Force against the Lions when they kick off on the 28th of June. There's a very high indication that there will be, when the Reds face them, that there will be a couple of players like Matty Fessler who will likely also start in that side. So this brings us to the last question of this collab pod, of this discussion, before all of us dive headlong into this crazy world that is the Lions tour. Gentlemen, we have this squad in front of us. We have these men in front of us. Do we think, I think we posed this question at the end of the Lions pod when we kind of asked JB, do you think this is a squad that can 100% win this series? Now I ask that question of you both now. Do you see a squad here that gives you more confidence that the Wallabies can win? Do you feel the same? Do you feel less confident? Do you think this is a side that can win? Nathan?
Probably slightly more. I mean, I still think, let's be real, the Wallabies will go into this as heavy underdogs. And the reality is when you play four nations, 2 or 3 which are ranked above you, you're going to be You're going to be underdogs. That's the reality situation. And I think in terms of the squad that's been put together, what we've seen from past spring tour form and the added guys have come in off very good Super Rugby years like De Crepney and Toole, I think there's just enough depth and there's enough headaches that you can kind of throw at a Lions team that could absolutely jag that first test. And then you get that first test, it is wide open from there. I think you need that first test to really build pressure. So I think there's enough excitement, there's enough X factors in this side, along with that cohesion factor, which I think is a big thing on Lions tour. When they're going to have probably 6 games before that first test to get everything right. So I think I'm slightly more optimistic, but I'm still in the basket of we are in no sense favourites to win against the Lions come that first test.
Happy.
Well, fan is short for fanatic, so I'll certainly. I've got to be honest. I look at this squad and I tend to look at them and think about the Lions team player for player, and I'm not scared of the Lions team because they've had a couple of unfortunate injuries, which is part of it. But I'm not scared of them because I thought they would pick the jumbo package and basically come down here and try and beat the daylights out of us, which is their traditional way of playing. And the squad to me looks like they really want to play rugby. And if that happens, good dry tracks, I think we're on. I'm going 2-1 to us, maybe even 3-0. Like I'm actually saying that as if I believe it, not just that's actually my heart, not my head, not just my heart, because I'm not scared. There's probably like Finn Russell scares me in the Lions. Like if he gets nice front football, clean plate, he could really tear us to pieces. But I don't think their pack doesn't frighten me. Like Murray Toji's good, but he's good at line out, but he's not brilliant around the park. Ty Burns really good. Their front row is looks like they're just trying to survive, which is fine. But it just doesn't. They don't scare me as much as they did 12 or 14 months ago. 14 months ago, I was thinking, far out, we're going to get embarrassed. But I look at this squad, and I think, no, we can do this. What do you think, Nathan? No, Nick, sorry.
I'm Rick. Yes, that's all.
Yeah, I've gone to Asia. Rick.
I know. In 2013, when it came down to that series, it was 1-1, and then the Lions kind of cleaned the Wallabies off the park with that display in Sydney when they kind of ran out 41, 16 winners. And I think I recall that was a series, from my time just out of school that the Lions were tipped to win. I recall, and that was when the Wallabies were number 2 in the world. I look at this and I don't see a single blowout match happening in this when it comes to this 3-test series. I think I see this squad, and I see a squad that's played a lot together. I see a squad that knows some of their strengths. And also I see a squad that, going back to that Squidge video that we've talked about a few times, the one thing that he's really has come to epitomize the Wallabies is a feeling of adventure. They play with adventure and with excitement and with enjoyment, and they really play for each other. And I see that with this squad, and it is something that works into their favor immeasurably when it comes to this. Those first 2 tests particularly are going to be very, very critical. I think it does help with the second test that the Lions, while the Wallabies have a week to freshen up, the Lions have got to go and get the snot beaten out of them by the First Nations Pacifica side in Melbourne, which definitely plays into our hands a bit for that second test match. With the Wallabies also having a rest, even though they may have a couple of players who might play, you never know. But I think I see this, and I think it's going to be a much closer series. Do I think that it tips the scales in the favor of the Wallabies? No, I still think it's going to be I kind of am thinking a 2-1 series so far. But every single match, both sides will be in it until the end. This is not going to be a shellacking. It is going to be a thriller. It is going to be a heartbreaker. and it is going to be the sort of result that we'll be talking about for years to come, whether we win or lose. That's what I think is going to happen. It's the right sort of problem to have. And it's the right sort of problem to have, which, in all honesty, just makes me go, shit. My heart will either sing or will be completely and utterly devastated and broken. And then we've got to come on podcast and try and compartmentalize it through words and inefficient swearing.
And we all know how that script worked in the past.
I know.
So at least I'm old enough to remember some good times.
See,
I don't know what's going on with you young guys.
Stockholm syndrome. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, for all of our listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this collab pod. We're going to be, probably from this point on, pretty much, we'll be basically splitting off. The Talking Teams boys will continue to, in fact, Talking Teams. They'll be doing some preview podcasts ahead of each match, talking about the squads for each respective side going forward. Nathan and I, as well as a couple of the other DKO guys, will be in response mode. We'll be talking instant reactions. We'll be talking after the live games. We'll be kind of doing back and forth. It'll be a tag team option in the interim period. So I hope you guys are ready for some green and gold rugby coverage covering the Lions. Beforehand, though, we've got the drop kickoff at least has one more episode coming out. Dropping tomorrow. With this episode, if you're listening to it Friday morning, it'll probably be dropping late Friday morning. And it is a final episode rounding off the 2025 Super Rugby season that I did with a certain Nick Hartman, where we get super honest. So stand up for that one. And for everyone else listening, we'll catch you for a new international season coming around the corner. Bring on the British and Irish Lions. Fuck.
What a finish.
Yeah, good.